This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of our 5-part series with Jamie. That was a cross between James and Jimmy.
Yes, I crossed over.
Jamie.
It's now James, but you can call me Jimmy. Now you're not going to know what to say. Lee's allowed to call me Jimmy. I'll just...
Hey, Jamie. We're with Jimmy Canali, store manager at Starbucks in Aurora, Colorado. And just to qualify, Jimmy is here as Jimmy, not as a Starbucks representative, in case anyone had that confused. That's not the case. We're here exploring the transition that coffee's going through, and we are trying to navigate how we, as both the specialty coffee industry and the commercial coffee industry, is going to dig in and really traverse how we navigate this. So in the last episode, we were talking about what has changed in the past 5 years, and in this episode, we're going to look specifically at how a company like Starbucks, again, even though Jimmy is not representing Starbucks, but from Jimmy's perspective, how did a company like Starbucks navigate the challenges of the past 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, and I really liked the way you and Andre, anyone listening should listen to those. Anyone in Starbucks, and this is part of my answer, and stepping back, I'm going to kind of define how we did this the last 3 years, but Starbucks would never define themselves as commercial. And I think part of that is because when some people close their eyes, think of and you say commercial, they're thinking Super Bowl commercials, they're thinking industry, they're thinking industrial. And Starbucks is very much into the handcrafted experience, from how we're creating beverages and crafting beverages and food for people, to how leaders are creating experiences for their team, to how those district managers and corporate leaders are creating experiences for store managers. And so my perspective is a little bit in the middle, but still very much in retail. And I think there's probably a whole nother side, because most all of the Starbucks leadership was remote. And so that very much changed things. That changed probably, and I've talked to a lot of people. So from talking to them, that allowed people to live in a lot of different places around family, to focus on different things. And so there's probably a huge uptick in balance for that side of Starbucks. And I think that was really important for the emotional health behind the scenes.
Can I ask a quick question level, there? Sorry, when you say that the leadership was remote, what does that mean?
So
how did that look?
All the teams that would help build Starbucks structure, so that could be training teams, save teams that needed to be on location. So coffee quality teams that are cupping or tasting would be more in person. And so I think that changed also. I mean, we had a lot of teams, just like Zoom, had a lot of meetings online. I think as a whole company, we celebrated our 50 years in business through a big event just online, which was kind of really weird.
Strange.
And at the same time, on the local level, obviously we are dealing with constant mandates changing in all 50 states and then all around the world.
Yeah,
so
right.
You are dealing with just so many different experiences on a local level, and how many things, and Sergey talked about this from Narrative, if I said his name right, and that was just not part of, obviously, how any manager or owner was trained. And so on the fly, we're figuring out, how do you navigate constant change, so many different challenges that you now have to escalate, communicate. And I think the big thing comes back to why Starbucks would never say they're commercial, but I understand the point because of the scale of Starbucks, and that is the handcrafting experience. And they've really wanted to get on the health of your team. How are you taking care of, as a store manager, I'm held accountable, and a lot of the growth and leadership and conversations is, how am I taking care of the experience of each individual? teammate. So the voice of the baristas really, really matters. Um, and obviously there's been frustration that I'm not going to dive too deep into, but if you've seen the news, you know there's frustration around a company as big as Starbucks right now. And Starbucks is continuing to lean into how do we listen better? How do we redefine how we listen? And then how do we give partners what they need? We just had an all company stores closed down for 4 hours in the last couple weeks and will continue to go through a very individualized training where people self-assessed and they break people up in learning, owning, and advising. And so each group gets something curtailed just to them. So it's a really, I think, powerful moment for Starbucks to slow down and invest and really put their money where their mouth is and saying, like, we do care, we are going to try and get better. And I think they've really tried and continue to try, which is why I've stayed with them, on how do we keep making this experience better? Because we're owning that it's not perfect and it's definitely not great. It might be good in spots, it might be good for a couple people, but how do we make it better for everybody?
And like with anything, when you try and scale what you're doing, the problems that may seem insignificant when it's on the level of one store, once you try and expand that out and grow it to 2 stores or 5 stores or 10 stores or thousands of stores,
Yeah,
those little
50,000.
problems just become exacerbated. And as anyone who's been a small business owner will tell you, it is very expensive to invest in people. It is really, really expensive to give a shit about somebody's well-being. It is really, really expensive to care about your staff's mental health. And yet, business owners will tell you 100% of the time, it's worth it if they stay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to have watched the industry navigate the last 3 years. 3 years ago, the question I would be most asked from consulting clients is, how do I make more money? So I say 3 years because that's right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
The question I get the most now, how do I manage my staff's mental health? That's what people are most concerned by right now. They really, really care about, how am I going to get my staff feeling healthy again? How am I going to get my team excited about coming to work? How am I going to get my staff wanting to feel good about themselves when they show up at work? So as we move forward, Jimmy, does Starbucks look at what's coming, or do you as a manager look at what's coming and say, I've got to figure out how to look after everybody at the same time. I've got to look, as a store manager, I've got to look after what the company wants. I've got to look after what my staff want, and I've got to look after what my customers need? Or do you approach the changes that are happening and say, we've just got to be flexible enough to adapt to whatever changes come?
That's a really good question. I think more of the second. I think while I'm improving and the lives and the mental health of everyone around me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not taking, in the end, the end responsibility. So how do I walk through an environment? And this is the question I've been wondering for a year and trying my best to live out. How do I offer what's needed, which is mental health, emotional health, an amazing employee experience where everybody's so gripped by the fear and the panic and other
Mm-hmm.
things going on in the world. And at the same time, I didn't necessarily gain more to give. So how do I come in with a perspective that does allow me to be flexible, that allows me to answer the call of what's needed? And I think that's a constant challenge. At the same time, I think it is kind of simplified in, let's come back to just connecting with people and
Right.
listening to the person in front of you. So who's in front of you? What's in your hands? Well, my team's in my hands. Like, let's simplify it to them. who's in the building right then, and how do I get my team and those customers to connect and build a relationship. And it's a lot more about just building the relationships that are in the building at the time and what's getting in the way of that. And I think when that becomes the whole focus of everybody, and it's really clear who doesn't want to be part of that, and how do you facilitate an environment where it's like, this is our entire mission. Our entire mission is to connect with each other, because that's what people need right now. And I think that's what cafes can offer, is a little bit of human dignity, a little bit of connection and laughter, and a little bit of coffee. And I think keeping it simple while there's all those complex things is important.
So well said. I think that we often conflate why we exist as an industry. And I like to look at cafes as like a blank canvas for the opportunity of community in the community. And behind that canvas is a group of us people that help figure out how to make that canvas run. But our customers show up and actually paint the picture that is that community.
Yeah.
But in the creation of that, there's a sense of chaos that happens that tries to instill dignity for us as people and us as employees and as business owners and all of that kind of stuff, which is so difficult to traverse. And I don't think that we have arrived there yet. And I think that the last few years, as the commercial industry has tried to navigate that, I think both the commercial and the specialty industries have looked at that and said, maybe we've got some shit to learn from each other. I do think that with that, we have another chapter coming up that is going to completely redefine our industry. And those who took the lessons from the last 3 years will navigate this next era in a very different way than those who didn't. So one more point that I want to ask you about with regards to the way the commercial industry navigated the past 3 years. And please, from anyone from Starbucks who is listening to this, I don't use the word commercial in any kind of a derogatory or demeaning kind of way, or in any to be condescending at all. I have a huge respect for what Starbucks brings to the communities that they open their cafes in, and also to the opportunities that they present to their staff. It's a really difficult way to navigate building a business. Starbucks have managed to offer a whole bunch of employee benefits that individual small business owners often can only dream of ever being able to offer their staff, even if they want to. So there is pluses and minuses to being either a small business owner or being a huge company like Starbucks. So I use it purely in the sense that Starbucks is a highly commercialized endeavor. So I just want to make that point. But the part that I want to explore, just to wrap up this conversation, is if we look at how the commercial industry has traversed the last 3 years, we've looked at it from an employee perspective and we've looked at it from a business perspective. But from a coffee perspective, we've seen drops in yield from production. We've seen a shift in home brewing where people are leaning more into that. We've seen inflation. We've seen all of these things that are impacting the product per se. How has Starbucks, or how have you guys in the cafe had to navigate the shift in the way that the product itself, coffee, has had to change over the past few years?
I can speak to kind of the general inventory of all things in retail has been chaotic. running out of stuff, having to find new manufacturers. And while I think Starbucks length and breadth has removed a lot of the stress of finding coffee in your stores, but just the way the supply chain is going has been absolutely chaotic as a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for every business. And so I think, again, it comes back to, can I build relationships with my customers over the whole menu that we offer? I think this is worth probably another segment of the podcast, but how do you diversify what you're doing? How do you move from just specialty coffee? And I'm speaking globally. How do you move from specialty coffee to just a specialty experience?
Right.
And so that could be in the food we offer. Starbucks is the most consistent food you'll find, but the rest of the coffee industry, save one of my favorites. I am going to shout out Maxwell and Sergey. Narrative has an amazing food program, but they are the exception. I think the food programs in every cafe that I go into, there's one in Denver that I'm really impressed by, but there's few and far between that I go, this is just an amazing specialty experience. If I'm not, maybe I'm coming in the building for more than just coffee, because farmers are asking themselves, if you listen to the podcast with all the farmers that come on with Map It Forward, they're asking, how do I diversify what's on my farm? And I think we need to rethink, like, how do we interact with coffee farmers so they could be successful? If I was running my own business and not with Starbucks, I would really want to make that relationship, while not physically accessible, by flying everyone to origin. How can I bring people onto origin and highlight the farmers I do interact with as a business owner? And how do I highlight their farm, their troubles, their struggles, maybe even get different options of people investing in them and the crops they're growing? So I think there's a lot to dream of there. But as a business owner and manager of a Starbucks, I think the big thing is building the relationships with people and just being really open to diving into it when they're missing their favorite thing. But we haven't had any issues with coffee
in awesome.
The last 3 years.
That's great.
As far as local level.
Yeah. I mean, the supply chain in general has been quite discombobulated. So even if the actual coffee isn't something that you've had a problem getting it to Starbucks and perhaps on the back end, you may not be seeing it at the storefront.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So, I mean, and no one has been immune across the entire coffee industry.
That's
nobody
a good
has
point
been
of clarification. There have been issues. We've been shielded from it. If I was still at the roastery, it would probably be clear, because obviously you offer farm specific coffee there. And so it might be clearer what we can or can't offer. But I've also seen the price points of those coffees go up.
Oh, man.
As I've had friends send me those coffees. So,
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to head into the next episode where we're going to talk about what changes in leadership and management are needed to get us through this transitioning time ahead. And who better to talk to us about this than you, Jimmy? So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. We'll see you in the next episode, everybody. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.